My name is Eleanor, and at 58 years old, I never imagined I would be standing outside the house I bought for my son and his wife, watching a realtor place a for sale sign in the yard. The text message from my only child still burned in my phone. "You won't be joining us on the cruise. My wife prefers to keep it just family." Family. After I had paid for their $300,000 home, the betrayal cut deep, but my response shocked everyone, including myself. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to teach someone a difficult lesson about the true meaning of family and gratitude. I've always believed that family comes first. That's how my late husband Frank and I raised our only son Michael. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we were comfortable in our modest 3-bedroom home in a quiet suburb of Minneapolis. Frank worked as an electrical engineer for a manufacturing company, while I taught second grade at the local elementary school. We saved carefully, lived within our means, and made sure Michael never lacked for anything important. Michael was our miracle baby. After 5 years of trying to conceive and 2 heartbreaking miscarriages, he came into our world healthy and perfect. From the moment I held him in my arms, I knew I would do anything for this child. Perhaps that was my first mistake, though I couldn't have seen it then. As a little boy, Michael was sweet and affectionate. He had Frank's analytical mind and my creative spirit, a combination that made him both thoughtful and imaginative. I remember how he would build elaborate Lego structures and then create detailed stories about the people who lived inside them. His kindergarten teacher once told us, "Michael has the mind of an architect and the heart of a novelist." Frank and I encouraged his talents, spending weekends taking him to museums, science centers, and libraries. We weren't helicopter parents by any means, but we were deeply involved in his education and development. Family dinners were sacred in our home. No matter how busy our days had been, we gathered around the table each evening to share our experiences and thoughts. Those moments are among my most cherished memories. When Michael was 10, Frank started a tradition of father-son camping trips every summer. They would pack up the old station wagon and head to the North Woods for a week of fishing, hiking, and stargazing. Michael would return home, sun-kissed and full of stories, his eyes bright with the special bond he shared with his father. Meanwhile, I had my own special activities with Michael. We baked together every Sunday afternoon, with Michael eventually mastering my mother's secret recipe for cinnamon rolls that had been passed down through generations. During school breaks, we volunteered together at the local animal shelter, where Michael showed remarkable empathy for the abandoned pets. High school brought changes, as it always does. Michael remained a good student, but he became more interested in his social circle than family time. This was natural, of course, and Frank and I gave him the space to grow and develop his identity. Still, he joined us for Sunday dinners, even when it meant rearranging plans with friends. He respected the importance we placed on family connections. Michael earned a scholarship to attend the University of Minnesota, studying architectural design. Frank and I couldn't have been prouder when he graduated with honors. We hosted a backyard barbecue for the occasion, with all our extended family and Michael's friends in attendance. I remember looking at my son in his cap and gown, thinking how blessed I was to be his mother. After college, Michael moved to Chicago for a position with a prestigious architectural firm. The distance was difficult for me, especially after Frank passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack just 2 years after Michael's graduation. Suddenly, at 50, I found myself alone in the house that had once been filled with family, laughter, and love. Michael was supportive in his way, calling regularly and visiting on major holidays. During one Thanksgiving visit, he brought Heather, a woman he had been dating for several months. She was beautiful and poised, with an MBA from Northwestern and a job in corporate marketing. I noticed immediately how she appraised my modest home with a certain detachment, her eyes lingering on my outdated kitchen and the family photographs that covered the walls. "Your home is so charming," she said in a tone that suggested she meant the opposite. "Very cozy." I tried to warm to Heather, preparing all of Michael's favorite dishes and sharing stories from his childhood. She smiled politely, but seemed bored by these glimpses into his past. When Michael stepped out to take a work call, she occupied herself with her phone, making no effort to engage with me. Still, I wanted to support my son's relationship. "She seems very accomplished," I told Michael later when we had a moment alone. "She's amazing, Mom," he replied, his eyes lighting up in a way that told me he was truly smitten. "Her family is really well connected in Chicago. Her father plays golf with the mayor." 6 months later, Michael called to announce they were engaged. "Heather's parents are throwing us an engagement party next month," he said excitedly. "They're inviting all their friends, including some potential clients for me. This could really help my career, Mom." I was happy for him truly. "That sounds wonderful, honey. I'd love to meet Heather's family." There was a pause on the line. "Well, the thing is, Mom, it's going to be at this exclusive country club. Heather's parents are members. It's pretty fancy." I understood what he wasn't saying. "You're worried I won't fit in." No, it's not that," he backpedaled. "It's just different from what you're used to. And it's a long trip for you to make for just one evening." I swallowed my hurt. "Of course, you're right. I wasn't invited to the engagement party." Michael sent photos afterwards, smiling in a tuxedo beside Heather in a designer gown I couldn't have afforded on my teacher's pension. They were surrounded by well-dressed people raising champagne flutes in a ballroom that looked like something from a movie. The wedding planning began immediately, with Heather's mother taking charge. I received occasional updates from Michael, usually prefaced with phrases like, "Heather's mom found the perfect venue," or "Heather's parents have arranged for a renowned chef to cater." When I asked how I could help, Michael hesitated. "Actually, Mom, everything's pretty much covered. Heather's parents are handling most of it. They want to give her the wedding of her dreams." I offered to host a small rehearsal dinner, something intimate for the wedding party. "That's really sweet, Mom," Michael said. "But Heather's father has already booked a private room at Le Bernardin. It's this amazing restaurant in New York." New York. The wedding location had been decided without my input. When I expressed surprise, Michael explained that Heather had always dreamed of a Manhattan wedding, and her parents had connections that made it possible. "I know it's a long way for you to travel, Mom, but we'll help with your arrangements," he assured me. "Heather suggested a nice hotel that's within your budget." Within my budget. Not within theirs, though they were spending thousands on exotic flowers and a designer dress. I didn't say this, of course. I simply thanked him and started setting aside money for the trip. The wedding was as lavish as expected. Heather was stunning in a gown that cost more than my car. Michael looked handsome and happy. I wore a blue dress I'd found on sale and tried not to feel out of place among the elegantly attired guests, most of whom were Heather's family and friends. At the reception, I was seated at a table far from the wedding party, with distant relatives of Heather, who barely acknowledged me. When I finally got a moment with Michael, he seemed distracted, his eyes constantly scanning the room, as if looking for more important people to speak with. "I'm so happy for you, sweetie," I told him, fighting back tears. Your father would have been so proud. Thanks, Mom, he said, giving me a quick hug. Oh, I think Heather's father is about to make a toast. I should get back. I watched him hurry away, back to his new family. That night in my hotel room, I cried for the first time since Frank's funeral. Something had shifted, and I couldn't pretend otherwise. My son was moving in circles that excluded me by design. After the wedding, Michael and Heather settled into a luxury apartment in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood. My calls became less frequent, as Michael always seemed too busy to talk. When I did reach him, Heather was often audible in the background, asking who was calling or reminding him of some engagement they needed to prepare for. I tried to maintain our connection by sending care packages with homemade cookies and small gifts. Once I received a polite but distant thank you text from Heather. Michael enjoyed your cookies. In the future, could you perhaps send something gluten-free? We're trying to cut back on traditional flour. When I visited Chicago 6 months after the wedding, I wasn't invited to stay in their spacious apartment. We don't really have a proper guest room set up yet, Michael explained, though their apartment had 3 bedrooms. There's a nice Holiday Inn not far from us. During that visit, I barely saw my son. He and Heather had scheduled a dinner with her colleagues one night, a charity event the next, and a brunch with friends on Sunday morning. Our time together was limited to a hurried coffee before I departed for the airport. Next time will be better, Michael promised, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. Things are just crazy right now with work and Heather's social commitments. I nodded and smiled, not wanting to burden him with my disappointment. On the flight home, I realized I had spent more time alone in Chicago than with my only child. 2 years into their marriage, Michael called with exciting news. Heather's pregnant, Mom. You're going to be a grandmother. For the first time in years, I felt a surge of pure joy. A grandchild. Surely this would bridge the growing distance between us. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you both. When is the baby due? August, he replied. And Mom, I know you'll want to visit, but Heather's mother is planning to stay with us for the first month to help out. Of course she was. I understand, I said, though my heart sank. But I'd love to come after that when you're more settled. Definitely, Michael agreed, though something in his tone suggested he was just appeasing me. In the months leading up to the birth, I channeled my excitement into creating handmade gifts for my grandchild. I knitted blankets, sewed soft toys, and even refinished the cradle that had been Michael's when he was a baby. When I shipped these treasures to Chicago, I received another text from Heather. Thank you for the baby items. Very thoughtful. We've already furnished the nursery with organic, hypoallergenic pieces, but we'll find a place for your contributions. Contributions. As if I'd donated to a charity rather than poured my heart into gifts for my grandchild. Emma Olivia Patterson was born on August 12th, a healthy 7-pound baby with Michael's eyes. I learned of her arrival via a group text message that included dozens of recipients. The accompanying photo showed Heather in a hospital bed, looking remarkably composed for someone who had just given birth, with Michael and Heather's parents gathered around her. I was not invited to come meet my granddaughter. When Emma was 3 weeks old, I finally worked up the courage to ask when I might visit. Heather's mother is still with us, Michael explained. And honestly, Mom, things are pretty chaotic right now. Maybe when Emma is a bit older. 3 months passed, then 6. I received occasional photos of Emma, but no invitation to meet her. When Christmas approached, I called Michael directly. I'd really love to spend the holidays with you all, I said. to finally meet Emma and help out however I can. There was a long silence before Michael responded. We've actually made plans to spend Christmas at Heather's parents' vacation home in Aspen. Maybe in the spring. Spring came and went with more excuses. By Emma's first birthday, I still hadn't met my granddaughter in person. I wasn't invited to the elaborate party Heather arranged, though I saw plenty of photos on social media. My beautiful granddaughter, surrounded by strangers who had more access to her than I ever had. It was around this time that Michael called with what seemed like good news. Heather and I are thinking of buying a house in the suburbs, he said. We need more space now that Emma is getting bigger. That's wonderful, I replied, genuinely pleased that they were thinking of a more family-oriented environment for my granddaughter. The thing is, he continued, his voice taking on that hesitant quality I'd come to recognize when money was about to be discussed. The kind of neighborhood we want to live in is pretty expensive. The down payment alone is substantial. I understood immediately what he was asking. Since Frank's death, I had been careful with my finances. I still lived in our modest home, which was fully paid off. I had Frank's life insurance money, my teacher's pension, and some investments that had performed reasonably well. I wasn't wealthy, but I was secure. How much would you need? I asked. Michael named a figure that made my breath catch. $300,000. Enough for them to buy a house outright in many parts of the country, but in their case, just a down payment on $1 million property. I know it's a lot, he said quickly, but it would mean so much to us. And to Emma. She deserves to grow up in a safe neighborhood with good schools. Like the neighborhood you grew up in, I thought, but didn't say. Instead, I told him I would think about it. That night, I sat in Frank's old armchair, imagining what he would advise. Frank had always been more practical than I was, less likely to be swayed by emotion. But he had also believed in supporting family. Would he see this as a worthy investment in our granddaughter's future? Or would he recognize what I was reluctant to acknowledge, that Michael and Heather were taking advantage of my desire to remain connected to them in the end? My heart overruled my head. I called Michael the next day and agreed to provide the down payment. On one condition, I added. I want to be more involved in Emma's life, to finally meet her and establish a real grandmother-granddaughter relationship. Absolutely, Michael promised. Once we're settled in the new house, we'll have plenty of room for you to visit. Emma will love getting to know you. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So I liquidated some investments and transferred the funds for their down payment. Michael was effusive in his gratitude. Even Heather called to thank me, though her appreciation seemed rehearsed and hollow. They closed on the house, a beautiful 5-bedroom colonial, in one of Chicago's most exclusive suburbs. Michael sent photos of empty rooms explaining their vision for each space. There was no mention of when I might see this house in person or meet the granddaughter who would be living there. Months passed. Whenever I brought up visiting, there was always a reason why the timing wasn't right. They were renovating the kitchen. Heather was busy with a big project at work. Emma was going through a phase where she was anxious around new people, as if I were a stranger and not her grandmother. A year after I had provided the down payment, I still hadn't been invited to visit. Then came Michael's call about the family cruise. Heather's parents have organized this amazing Mediterranean cruise for the whole family, he explained excitedly. 2-week sailing around Italy, Greece, and the French Riviera. Emma's going to love it. That sounds wonderful, I said, my heart lifting at the thought of finally spending time with my son and granddaughter. When should I book my flight to meet you? The silence that followed was deafening. Actually, Mom, Michael finally said, his voice strained, this is more of a thing for Heather's side of the family. Her parents, her siblings, and their kids. I gripped the phone tighter. But you just said it was for the whole family. Well, yes, but… He trailed off clearly, uncomfortable. Michael, I haven't even met Emma yet. She's almost 2 years old, and I helped you buy your house specifically so we could spend more time together as a family. I know, Mom, and we appreciate that so much. It's just that this cruise was Heather's parents' idea, and they're covering most of the cost. I see. My voice had gone very quiet. And I'm not considered family enough to be included, even if I paid my own way, Michael sighed. Let me talk to Heather about it. Okay, maybe we can work something out. Later that evening, my phone pinged with a text message from my son. Mom, I'm sorry, but you won't be joining us on the cruise. Heather prefers to keep it just family. We'll plan something with you another time. Just family. Those 2 words shattered something inside me. After everything I had done, everything I had given, I was still an outsider. And now it was stated explicitly in a text message, no less. I wasn't family, not to Heather, and by extension, not to my own son. I sat in my kitchen, staring at those words, until my vision blurred with tears. Then something shifted inside me. The hurt transformed into a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I had been allowing this treatment, enabling it with my financial support and endless understanding. No more. With steady hands, I picked up my phone and made a call to my financial advisor. It was time for a different kind of family lesson. The text message about the cruise was the breaking point after years of building resentment and pain. I'd given so much only to be explicitly told I wasn't considered family. As I sat in my kitchen that evening, memories flooded back of all the times I'd been excluded, dismissed, or treated as an inconvenience by my son and daughter-in-law. I remembered Heather's condescending tone when she called my handmade baby gifts contributions. I thought of all the holidays spent alone while Michael celebrated with his new family. I recalled the countless excuses for why I couldn't meet my own granddaughter. And now, after providing $300,000 for their house, I was being told via text message that I wasn't family enough to join their cruise. The hurt was overwhelming, but something else was emerging through the pain. Anger. Not a blind, destructive rage, but a cold, clarifying anger that cut through years of making excuses for my son's behavior. For too long, I had been the understanding mother, the one who stepped aside gracefully, who never complained, who gave, without expectation, of gratitude. That woman was done being taken advantage of. I picked up my phone and called James Harrington, my financial advisor since Frank's death. James had helped me manage the life insurance money and my investments, always taking a conservative approach that had served me well. He was surprised to hear from me in the evening. "Eleanor, is everything all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "No, James, it's not," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need to discuss the money I gave my son for his house down payment." I explained the situation, including the fact that there had been no formal loan agreement, just a verbal understanding that I would have more access to my granddaughter. James listened patiently, then sighed. "Unfortunately, Eleanor, without written documentation, that money might legally be considered a gift rather than a loan. However," he added, when he heard my sharp intake of breath, "you mentioned they haven't fully paid off the mortgage yet, correct?" "Yes, they put down the $300,000 and finance the rest. Then there might be options. Let me make some inquiries and call you back tomorrow. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with thoughts of all the times I'd accepted less than I deserved in the name of keeping peace. By morning, I had made a decision. I would no longer be the doormat that Michael and Heather wiped their feet on before entering their perfect life. James called back mid-morning. "I've spoken with my contact at the bank that holds their mortgage," he said. "There's something interesting about how the down payment was structured. It seems that because of how the funds were transferred, you're actually listed as a co-owner of the property. This was news to me. What exactly does that mean?" "It means you have legal rights to the property. You could, if you wanted, force a sale of the house and reclaim your investment, plus potentially a portion of any appreciation in value." The implications of this took a moment to sink in. I could make them sell their house. Essentially, yes, it would require legal proceedings, but given the circumstances and the fact that you're a co-owner on paper, you have a strong position. I thought about the beautiful colonial home that my money had helped purchase. The home I'd never been invited to visit. The home where my granddaughter was growing up, not knowing who I was. What if I wanted to buy them out instead? I asked. To purchase the house from them? James was silent for a moment. That's an unconventional approach, but legally feasible. You'd need to offer fair market value, of course. And they could refuse, though that would likely lead to a legal battle they might not win, given your co-ownership status. I want to make an offer, I decided. And I don't want Michael to know it's coming from me, at least not initially. Can we handle this through a third party? We can work through a real estate attorney. I know someone discreet who specializes in complex property transactions. Over the next few days, I worked with James and his recommended attorney, Sarah Goldstein, to craft our approach. Sarah suggested creating a limited liability company, under which to make the offer, providing a layer of anonymity. She also advised offering slightly above market value to make refusal less likely. The goal is to make the offer too good to refuse, she explained. Given their financial situation, which appears to rely heavily on Heather's family's connections, rather than solid savings, a significant cash offer might be very attractive. I agreed, though it would mean using more of my savings than I had initially planned. Frank had always been prudent with money, building a solid financial foundation for our future. I had maintained that prudence after his death. Now, for the first time, I was willing to take a financial risk, not for security, but for self-respect. 2 weeks after Michael's cruel text message, a formal offer was delivered to their home. The LLC offered 15% above market value for the property, with a clause requiring them to vacate within 60 days. It was a clean cash offer with no contingencies. That evening, my phone rang. It was Michael, sounding excited. "Mom, you won't believe this. We just received an incredible offer on the house. Some investment company wants to buy it for way above what we paid. This is perfect timing with the baby on the way." The baby on the way. Another piece of family news I was learning about, incidentally, rather than directly. Another grandchild I would likely never meet. "That's quite a coincidence," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Are you considering accepting? Definitely. The offer is too good to pass up. Heather's dad knows about this great property in Lake Forest, even more exclusive than our current neighborhood. With this money, we could make a down payment there and still have enough left for Heather to take an extended maternity leave." Not once did he mention my initial investment that had made their current house possible. Not once did he consider that perhaps I should be consulted or that some of the proceeds should be returned to me. "What about my down payment?" I asked directly. There was a pause. "What about it?" "I provided $300,000 so you could buy that house, Michael. If you're selling at a profit, I would expect that money to be returned to me." Another silence, longer this time. "Mom, that was a gift. You never said anything about being paid back." I said I wanted to be part of Emma's life, to finally meet my granddaughter. That hasn't happened. "That's not fair," he protested. "We've been busy, and timing has been difficult. You can't put financial conditions on family relationships." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. "Isn't that exactly what you and Heather have done? Made me an outsider unless I'm providing financial support." "That's not true. Look, I need to go. Heather and I will discuss the offer and make our decision. I'll let you know what we decide." The call ended abruptly. I sat in my living room, staring at the family photographs that still decorated my walls. Pictures of Michael growing up, Frank and me on our wedding day, the three of us at Michael's college graduation, a family that no longer existed except in my memories and these fading images. 3 days later, Sarah called to inform me that Michael and Heather had accepted the offer. They didn't know I was behind the LLC, but they would find out during the closing process when final paperwork was signed. I decided to fly to Chicago to be present for that revelation. In the meantime, Michael called several times, updating me on their plans for the new house they intended to purchase with the proceeds from the sale. Each call was friendly and inclusive, a stark contrast to his previous distance. Now that he believed money was flowing in, I was suddenly worth keeping in the loop. "We'll definitely have you visit once we're settled in the new place," he promised. "It has a beautiful guest suite that would be perfect for you." I made appropriate sounds of interest, but committed to nothing. The closing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, and I booked my flight and hotel accordingly. On the day of closing, I arrived at the attorney's office 30 minutes early, sitting quietly in a corner of the waiting room. When Michael and Heather entered, they were deep in conversation about their plans for the money, not noticing me until they had checked in with the receptionist. Michael spotted me first, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I stood, smoothing down the suit I had purchased specifically for this occasion. "I'm here for the closing, Michael." Heather looked between us, her perfectly maintained eyebrows drawing together. "Why would you be at our closing?" Before I could respond, Sarah emerged from her office. "Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, Ms. Walker, we're ready for you now." Michael's confusion deepened. "You know my mother." "Of course," Sarah replied smoothly. "Ms. Walker is the principal of Patterson Property Acquisitions. See the entity purchasing your home today." The color drained from Michael's face as understanding dawned. Heather's mouth fell open, her usually composed demeanor cracking. "What is this?" she demanded, looking from Sarah to me. "Some kind of joke?" "No joke," I said calmly. "I'm buying the house that my money helped purchase. The house I was never invited to visit. The house where my granddaughter, whom I've never been allowed to meet, has been living." Michael stepped toward me, his voice low. "Mom, what are you doing?" "Exactly what you and Heather have been doing for years," I replied. "Making a business decision rather than a family one." "You can't do this," Heather interjected, her voice rising. "We've already put a deposit on the new house in Lake Forest." "Actually, she can," Sarah said, her professional tone unwavering. "Ms. Walker is already a co-owner of the property due to her initial investment. This transaction simply transfers full ownership to her. The paperwork is all in order, and the funds are in escrow. Unless you wish to return Ms. Walker's original down payment, and forgo the substantial profit you're receiving, this sale will proceed." The conference room fell silent as the reality of the situation sank in. Michael's face showed a conflict of emotions: anger, battling with the realization that he had brought this on himself. "Could I speak to my mother alone, please?" he finally asked. Sarah looked to me for confirmation. When I nodded, she and Heather stepped out, though Heather's reluctance was evident in her rigid posture and thinly veiled glare. Once we were alone, Michael turned to me. "Why are you doing this, Mom? If you wanted your money back, you could have just asked." "Would you have returned it?" I countered. "Or would there have been another excuse, another reason why now wasn't a good time? Just like every time I asked to see Emma." He had no answer to that, his silence confirming what we both knew to be true. "This isn't about the money, Michael," I continued. "It's about respect. It's about being treated like family, rather than an ATM you can access when needed and ignore when not. It's about hearing I wasn't family enough to join your cruise after everything I've done for you." "That was Heather's decision, not mine," he protested weakly. "And you went along with it, just like you've gone along with every decision to exclude me from your lives. You're a grown man, Michael, a husband and father. You make your own choices, and you've consistently chosen to push me away unless you needed financial help." His shoulders slumped. "What do you want Mom to punish us? By taking our home?" "No," I said softly. "I want what I've always wanted. To be part of your life, to know my granddaughter, to be treated with the basic respect any parent deserves. But I've realized I can't buy my way into that relationship, and I won't keep trying." I slid a folder across the table to him. "These are the terms of the sale. You'll receive the full amount we agreed upon, minus my original investment. The money will be transferred to your account upon signing. You have 60 days to vacate the property, as specified in the contract you already agreed to." "And then what?" he asked. "You'll move to Chicago and live in this house. That's not decided yet. But whatever happens, the house will be mine to do with as I choose, just as your relationship with me is yours to define. But understand this from now on, that relationship will be based on mutual respect, not financial dependence." Michael stared at the folder for a long moment, then raised his eyes to meet mine. For the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the son I had raised, the one who understood right from wrong, who recognized when he had fallen short. "I've really screwed up, haven't I?" he said quietly. "Yes," I agreed. "But recognizing that is the first step toward changing it." He nodded slowly. "What happens now? Now we complete this transaction. And then, if you're willing, we start the much harder work of rebuilding what's been broken. Not with money, but with honesty and genuine effort." Michael was quiet for a long moment, then reached for the folder. "I need to talk to Heather. This affects her too." "Of course. Take your time." He left the room, folder in hand, through the glass wall of the conference room. I could see him in intense conversation with Heather in the hallway. Her expression shifted rapidly, from anger to disbelief to a cold calculation that I recognized all too well. When they returned, Heather's composure was firmly back in place. "We'll sign," she announced, as if the decision had been hers all along. "But I want it on record that we consider this a breach of family trust." I almost laughed at the irony, but maintained my calm. "Noted." The rest of the closing proceeded with professional efficiency. Papers were signed, ownership was transferred, and bank information was confirmed for the wire transfer. Throughout the process, I maintained the calm dignity I had promised myself. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my self-respect. As we prepared to leave, Michael hesitated, then turned to me. "What about Emma? She loves that house. It's the only home she remembers." It was the first genuine concern for someone other than himself that he had expressed all day. "I'm not heartless, Michael. I would never do anything to hurt Emma. When you're ready for a real conversation about family, including my role as her grandmother, I'll be ready to listen." He nodded, uncertainty in his eyes. Heather tugged at his arm, clearly eager to leave. I watched them walk away, my son and his wife strangers, in many ways, despite our shared blood. I had no illusion that today's events would immediately repair our fractured relationship. In fact, they might drive us further apart in the short term. But for the first time in years, I had stood up for myself, refused to accept less than I deserved. And in doing so, I had shifted the dynamic between us in a fundamental way. Outside the attorney's office, I stood on the sidewalk watching as Michael and Heather drove away in their luxury SUV. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew that whatever came, I would face it with the strength and self-respect I had reclaimed today. The days following the closing were filled with a strange mixture of emotions: vindication and sadness, freedom and loss. I had taken back my power in our relationship, but the cost was high. For the first time since Michael was born, we weren't speaking at all. I extended my stay in Chicago, moving from the hotel to a short-term rental apartment while I decided what to do with the house I now owned. The property stood empty, Michael and Heather having moved most of their belongings out immediately, though they technically had 60 days to completely vacate. On my third day in Chicago, I finally drove to the house, my house now. It was in an exclusive neighborhood of manicured lawns and elegant homes, each set back from the street behind tasteful landscaping. The kind of neighborhood where people hired others to shovel their snow in winter and tend their gardens in summer. I parked in the driveway and sat for several minutes, gathering my courage before approaching the front door. Using the keys I had been given at closing, I entered what was legally my home, but felt nothing like it. The interior was still partially furnished with larger pieces, like the dining table and master bedroom set remaining. But the walls had been stripped of family photographs, leaving behind ghostly rectangles where frames had once hung. The entire space had a hollow, abandoned feeling, despite its high-end finishes and expensive fixtures. I wandered from room to room, trying to imagine my granddaughter playing in these spaces. In what was clearly Emma's bedroom, decorated in shades of lavender and mint, a forgotten stuffed rabbit lay in the corner. I picked it up, running my fingers over its soft ears and worn body evidence that it had been well loved. This small, discarded toy was my first tangible connection to the grandchild I had never met. Downstairs in the kitchen, I found a child's drawing magnetized to the refrigerator, overlooked in the hasty departure. A family, drawn in crayon, 3 stick figures labeled Mommy, Daddy, and Emma. No grandmother in the picture. Why would there be when I was a stranger to her that evening? I returned to my rental apartment and made a decision. I had no desire to live in this empty shrine to a family that had excluded me. But selling it immediately felt wrong too, a continuation of the cycle of financial transactions that had defined our relationship for too long. Instead, I decided to wait, to give Michael and Heather space to process what had happened and to give myself time to determine the best path forward. In the meantime, I would return home to Minneapolis. Before leaving Chicago, I wrote a letter to Michael expressing my feelings without anger or accusation. I explained that the house would remain vacant for the time being, that they were welcome to retrieve anything they had left behind, and that I was open to conversation when he was ready. I left the letter on the kitchen counter of the empty house, along with the stuffed rabbit and Emma's drawing, carefully preserved in a protective sleeve. Back in Minneapolis, I resumed my quiet life, though something had fundamentally changed. I felt stronger, more centered in my own worth. I joined a support group for estranged parents, finding comfort in sharing experiences with others who understood the particular pain of being separated from adult children. Through these meetings, I connected with Diane, a retired psychologist whose son had cut contact after marrying a controlling wife. The hardest part, she told me during coffee after one meeting, is accepting that you can't make them come back. You can open the door, but they have to choose to walk through it. I thought often about that door, imagining it standing ajar, welcoming but not demanding. I busied myself with volunteering at the local library, tending my garden, and occasionally having dinner with friends. Life continued as it always does, even through heartbreak. 3 weeks after my return to Minneapolis, my phone rang with a Chicago area code I didn't recognize. When I answered, a small voice said, "Is this Grandma Eleanor?" My heart nearly stopped. "Yes," I managed to respond. "This is Grandma Eleanor. Who's calling?" "I'm Emma," the voice said. "Daddy said I could call you because you found my bunny." Tears sprang to my eyes as I sank into the nearest chair. "Yes, I did find your bunny. His name is Hoppy, right?" I guessed, based on the faded name embroidered on its foot. "Yes," Emma sounded delighted that I knew. "He's my best friend for sleeping. Daddy brought him back yesterday." "I'm very happy Hoppy is home with you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the emotion overwhelming me. "Have you been having good sleeps with him?" Emma launched into a detailed account of her bedtime routine, her favorite stories, and how Hoppy had to be positioned just right, or he couldn't do his job of keeping bad dreams away. I listened, enchanted by this glimpse into my granddaughter's world. After about 5 minutes, I heard Michael's voice in the background. Emma said goodbye, promising to call again soon, and then Michael came on the line. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice tentative. "I hope it was okay that Emma called. She was really excited about talking to her grandma after I showed her your picture." "Of course it was okay," I replied. "It was wonderful, actually. Thank you for that." There was an awkward pause before he continued. "I found your letter at the house, and Emma's drawing. That was thoughtful of you to save it. I thought she might want it someday." Another silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken words. Finally, Michael sighed. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Mom, about everything that's happened, about how we've treated you." I waited, not wanting to interrupt what seemed like a difficult admission for him. "I was wrong," he continued. "We were wrong. The way we excluded you, took your financial help, while keeping you at a distance. It was inexcusable." "Thank you for saying that," I said softly. "I don't know if we can fix this," he admitted. "Heather is struggling with what happened with the house. She feels humiliated, especially having to explain to her parents why the Lake Forest purchase fell through." "I can understand that," I said, though part of me thought the humiliation was well-deserved. "What about you, Michael? What do you want going forward?" He was quiet for a moment. "I want Emma to know her grandmother. Whatever has happened between us, that shouldn't affect her relationship with you. And I want to try to rebuild something, Mom. I just don't know how, or if it's even possible after everything." It was the most honest he had been with me in years. "I think it's possible," I told him. "Difficult, but possible. It will take time and effort from both of us. Real effort, not just when it's convenient. I understand, he said. Can we start slow? Maybe regular phone calls with Emma, and eventually a visit. I'd like that very much, I agreed. And Michael about the house? You don't have to explain, Mom. It's yours to do with as you wish. We're staying with Heather's parents for now until we figure out our next steps. This surprised me. Her parents, I thought they lived in the suburbs. They do. He confirmed a note of what sounded like resignation in his voice. It's not ideal, but it's temporary. I'm looking at some job opportunities that might take us in a new direction. We talked for a while longer, the conversation easier than it had been in years, though still marked by the caution of two people finding their way back from a significant breach. Before we hung up, I made a decision. Michael, I'd like to make a proposal about the house. I have no interest in living there myself, but I don't want to sell it immediately either. What would you think about a lease agreement? You and your family could rent it from me at a fair market rate. That would give you stability for Emma and time to figure out your next steps without the pressure of staying with Heather's parents. There was a long pause. Are you serious? Yes. It would be a proper business arrangement with a formal lease and everything documented. No more informal understandings that can lead to misinterpretations. I don't know what to say. That's incredibly generous after everything that's happened. It's not generosity, I clarified. It's practicality. The house is sitting empty. You need a place to live. Emma needs stability. This solves multiple problems at once. Just understand that our personal relationship and this business arrangement need to remain separate. One doesn't depend on the other. I understand, he said, and for the first time in our conversation, I heard something like respect in his voice. Can I talk to Heather and call you back? Of course. 2 days later, Michael called again. Heather had agreed to the rental arrangement, though reluctantly. We set up a call with Sarah to draft a proper lease agreement with clear terms and expectations on both sides. During this process, I learned more about their financial situation, which was more precarious than I had realized. Michael had recently been passed over for a promotion he had been counting on. Heather's job in marketing was demanding, but not as lucrative as she pretended to her family. They had been over-leveraged even before purchasing the house, relying heavily on credit cards and financial help from both sets of parents to maintain their lifestyle. This explained much about their eagerness to sell when my offer came in and their shock when the Lake Forest purchase fell through. They had been counting on moving up the social ladder, not simply maintaining their current position. The lease was finalized, with Michael and Heather moving back into the house they had so hastily abandoned. The irony wasn't lost on any of us, but practicality won out over pride. For Emma's sake, I was glad she could return to her familiar bedroom and neighborhood. Our personal relationship developed separately, as I had insisted. Emma and I spoke on the phone twice a week, building a bond through stories and shared interests. She loved animals, just as Michael had at her age, and I sent her books about wildlife and sea creatures that we discussed during our calls. 3 months after our rental agreement began, I flew to Chicago for my first in-person meeting with Emma. Michael picked me up at the airport, the drive to the house filled with slightly awkward but not unpleasant conversation. We were finding our way back to some version of family, though it would never be what it once was. Emma was waiting on the front porch when we arrived, bouncing with excitement, Hoppy the rabbit clutched in her arms. "Grandma Eleanor," she shouted as I emerged from the car, running down the steps to throw her arms around my waist. I knelt to her level, finally embracing the granddaughter I had waited so long to meet. "Hello, Emma," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm so happy to finally meet you in person." She pulled back to study my face seriously. "You look just like your picture, except your eyes are more blue in real life." I laughed, charmed by her directness. "And you're even prettier than your pictures." She took my hand, leading me toward the house. "Come on, I want to show you my room and all my books and my fish tank that Daddy just got me." Michael carried my suitcase, following behind us, with a small smile that held both happiness and regret. At the door stood Heather, her expression carefully neutral. This was clearly Michael and Emma's initiative, one she was tolerating rather than embracing. "Hello, Eleanor," she said, stepping aside to let us enter. "Welcome." The greeting was cool, but not hostile, a starting point, if nothing else. "Thank you, Heather," I replied with equal formality. That weekend was a revelation. Emma and I bonded over baking cookies, reading together, and a trip to the Shed Aquarium, where her enthusiasm for marine life was contagious. Michael made genuine efforts to include me in conversations, asking about my life back in Minneapolis, and actually listening to my responses. Heather maintained her distance, polite but reserved. On my last evening, however, she surprised me by joining me on the back patio after Emma had gone to bed. "I wanted to talk to you alone," she said, sitting in the chair opposite mine, "about what happened with the house." I braced myself for recriminations, but her next words surprised me. "What you did was impressive," she admitted. "I wouldn't have thought you had it in you." It wasn't an apology, but there was a grudging respect in her tone that hadn't been there before. "Sometimes we surprise ourselves when pushed to our limits," I replied. She nodded, looking out at the garden rather than at me. "Michael has changed since all this happened. He's more assertive, less willing to just go along with what my parents want. It's been an adjustment." I suspected this adjustment hadn't been entirely welcome from her perspective, but I appreciated her honesty. "I can't promise we'll ever be close," she continued. "But for Emma's sake, and for Michael's, I'm willing to try to make this work. The new arrangement coexisting. That's all I ask," I told her. "A chance to be part of Emma's life, to have a relationship with my son that isn't defined by financial transactions or social climbing." Her eyes flashed briefly at the implied criticism, but she didn't deny it. "Fair enough," she said, standing to return inside. "Good night, Eleanor." "Good night, Heather." After that first visit, a new pattern emerged. I traveled to Chicago every other month to spend time with Emma. Between visits, our phone calls continued now, including occasional video chats where she proudly showed me her latest art projects or books she was reading. Michael and I slowly rebuilt our relationship, though it would never be the uncomplicated mother-son bond of his childhood. There was too much history, too much hurt on both sides. But we found a new way forward, based on honesty and clearer boundaries. 1 year after the house purchase that had changed everything, Michael called with unexpected news. "I've been offered a job in Minneapolis," he said. "A smaller firm, but with potential for partnership in a few years. And it would mean Emma could see you more regularly." I was momentarily speechless. "What about Heather? Her job in Chicago?" "She's been unhappy at her company for a while," he explained. "And honestly, Mom, things between us have been strained since everything that happened with the house and her parents. We're seeing a counselor, trying to figure out if we can rebuild on a healthier foundation. Being away from her parents' influence might actually help with that." "And the house?" I asked. "We'd terminate the lease, of course. You could sell it or find new tenants." Let me think about this, I said, an idea forming. What if instead of selling the house, I use it as an investment property? The rental income could be set aside in a trust for Emma's college education. Michael was quiet for a moment. You'd do that after everything. For Emma, yes. And for you, if this move represents a genuine desire to prioritize family connections over appearances. It does, he said softly. I've done a lot of soul-searching this past year about the kind of man I've been, the kind of father I want to be for Emma, the kind of son I should have been to you all along. 2 months later, Michael, Heather, and Emma moved to Minneapolis into a modest house just 20 minutes from mine. It was an adjustment for all of us, particularly Heather, who struggled with the perceived step down in social status. But for Emma, having her grandmother nearby was an unmitigated delight. The Chicago house was rented to a young family, the income placed in a trust for Emma as planned. Michael found satisfaction in his new job, where his work was valued for its quality rather than for the social connections he brought. Heather eventually found a position with a marketing firm that, while less prestigious than her Chicago job, allowed her more creative control. Our family dynamics continued to evolve. Heather and I maintained a cordial, if not warm, relationship. Michael and I found our way to a new understanding, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation or financial dependence. And Emma blossomed with the stability of having both her parents and her grandmother consistently present in her life. The painful lesson I had taught by purchasing the house had cost us all something. But from that difficult moment had come a reconstruction of our family on firmer foundations. Not perfect, not without its ongoing challenges, but real, in a way that our previous relationship had never been. Sometimes I reflect on the text message that changed everything. You won't be joining us on the cruise. My wife prefers to keep it just family. The words that had shattered my heart, but ultimately led to a reclamation of my dignity and a rebuilding of genuine family bonds. Family, I had learned, wasn't defined by cruises or houses or financial transactions. It was built day by day through honest conversations, consistent presence, and mutual respect. It was Emma's hand in mine as we walked through the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden. It was Michael calling just to check in, not because he needed something. It was even Heather making space in their lives for me, however reluctantly at first. The house that had been the catalyst for our family's transformation remained a symbol of both our fracture and our healing, an expensive lesson in what really matters and what family truly means. Have you ever had to take a difficult stand with family members who took you for granted? How did you handle it? And did it change your relationship for better or worse? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more tales of family transformation and the courage to stand up for your self-worth. And don't forget to share with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that true family is built on respect, not convenience or financial gain.